Hello, this is my final project presentation for Computer Science 30. And for my project, I did Hangman. So this just creates Hangman in P5.js. It uses a class, arrays, functions, and different user inputs. And different external files are also used for music, sound effects, and an animation library that is used for drawing. So this is going to go into all the different code structures of this program through this sketch file and this classes file and this words file here. So I'm going to start off with these different global variables that are used throughout the program. So first we have these win or lose and last chance checks. So they just check whether the user has won or lost the game or if they're on their last guess. These arrays keep track of different guessed letters so that they're not repeated. So this guess so far is for all letters, and correct and incorrect guesses, well, for correct and incorrect guesses. This state variable just keeps track of which part of the program a user is in, so whether they're in a menu or in the main game state or loading. Difficulty variable is for the difficulty, which is pretty self-explanatory, but that's changed in the difficulty menu. This high score variable is also pretty self-explanatory. It keeps track of the least amount of letters it is taken to guess a word. These are variables for correct letters of the Hangman word, and they're used in the letter class and assign values in one of the functions in that class. And on that note, repeat is another variable that's used to check if any letters are repeated in a word. So it's set to false automatically, and that's used in that check for repeats function as well. This letters array will contain all the objects of the different letters that are in that word, the word to guess. And this list right here, this array, just contains every letter in the alphabet so that the user cannot input numbers or symbols, and we'll see that used later on in the class. And finally, this incorrect counter here just keeps track of how many. After that, we have the preload function, which just loads up the different sound files that are used for music and sound effects. So these are all credited from freesound.org by different users. So if you want to use them or listen to them on their own, they're pretty great. There's this button style function that takes the parameter of a button, a CSS button, HTML button, and styles it with CSS. And since every button looks the same, there's no user input here. They can all use the same settings. Now in setup, creates most of the DOM elements. So these are pretty much almost every bit of text in this program is a DOM element, except for a select few things. So the program takes a bit longer to start up because setup creates almost every HTML element. But once it starts up, it runs very quickly since most of these are created beforehand. So we have the width and height just being set to the window. Some different headers that use the HTML H tags. So that's how we get the different sizes without resizing them with P5.js functions. Different buttons. So here are some different menus. I thought this was a fun discovery I made while working on this is .option function that's used on these menus. It takes the first parameter of a title, and then the second parameter is that actual value. So the actual value of these colors can be set to the colors themselves, which makes it pretty easy, especially in the difficulty menu, to program that into other functions, which we'll see in the letter class is used for the difficulties. And then they're all positioned using this .position function. And these are all based off the width and height of the window so that they should be congruent across everything, so that no matter how big your window is, it should look just about the same. And the buttons are stylized with that button style function. The main music is put on loop, and the text font is set to the value of the fonts menu. Next up, we've got this uFailed function. So this is also pretty self-explanatory, just a function for when the user fails the Hangman game. Got some text settings here. We display what the word was in these text functions. These are some of the only times that the text function in P5.js is used. Sets the win or lose variable to true and then plays the failure music and sets that final chance music off. So in draw, we just have a lot of different things that are always running. And there's a lot of stuff in here that isn't explained until later, so I'll just have to kind of take it step by step. Just first creates the canvas with the window width and window height, and the background of the value of the color menu, whichever color background the user chooses. So first I'm just going to run it. My tab is currently muted, but I'll unmute it later to show the music. So here we are. We've got the high score, we've got the headers, and these buttons. So this play button here activates this press play function. So this goes off when the play button is pressed. And it also goes off for replays. So I want to first go into the words.js file because that'll explain what's going on right here. So words.js is pretty much just for this one function. So this code takes a list of words from one string and converts it into an array using the .trim and .split methods, and I found this out from my research through this W3 resource article. So this convert to array function, it trims it and it splits it. So this split function turns it into a big array. So when we're doing this in press play, we're actually choosing a random word out of this big array. And then the amount of letters variable is set to the length of this word. So we get how many letters are in that word. And then this for loop here, it adds a bunch of new objects into the letters array from earlier. So we'll now go into the letter class. So the letter class takes these 4 variables here. So it takes the current counter value of the for loop. It takes the incorrect counter from earlier. It takes correct guesses and incorrect guesses arrays as well. So we go into the constructor here. These are set to this.c, this.I, this.correctList, and this.incorrectList. There's also this function that goes off here, check for repeats. So if we go down here, this sets the letter of word variable. So this was a fun thing to discover through my research. So it decides what letter to attribute to this specific object or this instance using the char@at method or character at. So that checks what character is at a certain spot in the string. So char@, or I'm just going to say character at, checks this.c value, which is this I counter. So it checks what letter is at that specific point in the word. So because this is checked with this.c and the I counter is used, this will only go for the length of the word. So that means when we press play here, we get 3 letters for a word that only has 3 letters in it. That works for every word. So I was pretty proud of this little discovery, and this made it pretty easy to program the initial section of this. And then after that, we have this letter occurrences variable. So this was a little more complicated. I was just figuring this out recently. This is for repeated letters within a word. So this takes that split function from before, and it checks for the letter of word. So it checks how many times is this letter, let's say A, in a word, let's say Alaska. So it would return letter occurrences is actually the length of this function here, word to guess.split minus 1. So if the word was Alaska, it would return 3, which would mean that there are repeated letters, which makes this little repeat variable here true. So that's pretty much what check for repeats does. There's more details on that in the comments here, and I also adapted this code from this Stack Overflow post, which was very helpful in figuring out how to check for repeat letters within a string. And yeah, that's pretty much what this for loop is doing. And then finally, it changes the state to the Hangman game state if it's in the main menu state or if it's in the loading state, which we'll see later in menu check. All right, after press play, which is what goes off after you press the start button. Sorry, I'm trying to find my way back to draw. Draw also has a couple other things. So it has the check for the options menu, or the options button, which when pressed goes to the options menu, which we'll go into that more in later. It also sets the text font back again to the font chosen by the player in the options menu. Set the text size, and this little piece of text here, I think this is the last piece of text that isn't a header or some other element, is the high score, which also has the text effects. There's this menu check function, which is extremely important to the program. It's basically where every piece of different code is checked using the DOM elements, the buttons and the headers. And this is where the lines are drawn. So the horizontal lines within the letter objects are drawn. So only one is drawn per object. So that means that every object draws its line. Every object belonging to a letter. So let's say this word is cat. So this draws the first object would draw the line at C, then A, and then T. Pretty simple. And draw is also always checking for the hang the man function, which is the function that, again, pretty self-explanatory. I'm pretty proud of the naming on some of these functions. It draws the different sections of the hangman. So this is a good time to actually display what we're doing here in the game. So let me guess a letter. E. Okay, so E was wrong. So this dot I, the incorrect counter, this dot I now equals 1. So the circle is drawn. And this is using the P5JS animation S library. So this animates the draw cycle of each element here. I shouldn't really say element, I should say each drawing. So yeah, this little circle is drawn now. And if I keep making incorrect guesses, all of these are drawn out. Now this only runs for the first time that you get one of these wrong, so you only get to see this little animation once, but it does default back to the regular P5JS function for these animations. So we've got incorrectly guessed up to the right arm here, and this is where the difficulty comes in. So if the difficulty equals 2, so the difficulty is on hard, more sections of the hangman are drawn. So we'll show that in a bit. The left arm is also drawn on hard difficulty, and if I get another one wrong, if I was on hard, then I would fail because the legs would be drawn with that too. So on regular difficulty, you lose on 6 guesses. So let's see if I can get that. So there's that arm, that leg, and the word was hot. So yeah, I failed. Now, if I turn my difficulty to easy, oh, this little face shows up. So this is in menu check, this little outline here. We'll get to that later. I get 9 guesses. So I'm pretty sure that's 10. So I'm just going to guess a bunch of letters that I don't think are right. And you can see that the animation is not going in now. But it will go in for this eye, these eyes. Unfortunately not this part because since, well, we'll get to that issue later, the loop stops so that the animation can't draw out if I use an animS function instead of a regular draw function. So we got those ones, and the eye gets drawn out, and the eye gets drawn out, and I'm just guessing letters already guessed. The word was 10. So there he is. That's the guy on easy mode. And on hard mode, clearly I'm not too good at this, so this shouldn't be too hard to fail. Takes a certain dedication to be this bad at Hangman. So, yeah, that took 4 guesses. So that's pretty much the hang the man function. The you failed function is used throughout it. So there's an important part of the hang the man function I skipped over, which is the what happens when you win. So if you get amount of letters down to 0, so throw out correct letter, as we'll go through in a little bit, it's constantly going down every correct letter you get. So once it reaches 0, then hooray, you won. So this plays some victory music and displays the victory message. So this would be a good time to show the music. I've had the site muted because the background music plays the whole time. So if we unmute that. That's the music. Incorrect noise. Sing. I'll try to keep. Some of them overlap a bit. That's because on replays it becomes hard to regulate the music. So that's the hang the man function. If we go back into Sketch, we have the press play function we went over. So now we'll go into the options menu. So this options menu function that goes off when you press the options button is pretty simple. So if you're in the options state, which is state 2, you'll go back using this back button, which also executes this exact same function. But if you're in state 0, the main menu state, sorry, I should probably mute this, then it'll send you to state 2, the options menu state. So now that we're in options, I can show how options actually works. So the font is pretty simple. There's 3 fonts to choose from. These are all system fonts that should be on every device that can play this game. So for safety's sake, these are the only fonts available. I'll pick Courier New because that's my favorite. Colors, just different color backgrounds. One of the desired features I wanted to add was different unlockable backgrounds based on your high score or how many rounds you get right. And I think I talk about this in the version tracking here, that I hope to work on this more in the future and add more features to it just as a fun hobby and to expand my coding knowledge a bit, because there's a lot that I unfortunately had to cut out due to time. And I talk about that more in the version tracking. I won't go all into that right now, but it's been a very busy, hectic past couple months, both personally and with school. So I just haven't had as much time for this project as I hoped, but that's okay. I think it still turned out pretty well considering everything. It's got all the required features and is pretty fun to boot. But anyway, these are all the options here. And we already looked at normal, easy, and hard difficulties. So I'm just going to put it normal for, for safety. Key pressed here is how the playing of the game actually works. So it checks that as long as the user is in the hangman game state, so the user can't input a bunch of letters while they're in any other state, and as long as win or lose is false, then whenever a user enters any key, it checks, it does these correct letter, incorrect letter functions on every object in the array, in the letters array. So the correct letter and incorrect letter functions are where I spent a lot of my time in this program, especially, well, actually both of them, not especially really either one. So to start off, correct letter function for when a correct letter is inputted. So I have to redefine letter of word with the same, it's redefined as the same thing so that this function recognizes it. So it checks that the key that is entered is the letter of word. So this checks every object in the array. So this is happening at the same time for each one of these 5 letters here, or any amount of letters that are in any word. So it's checking that the key is the letter of word, that it is the character at this section of the letter, and that it's not already been guessed. So this caused a lot of issues for repeated letters, but we'll see. I remedy that later within this section of code here. So when a key is a correct guess, like these E's right here, the correct noise plays, as we heard earlier, and the amount of letters goes down. So this should have incremented 2 of them, because there's 2 E's. So the amount of letters goes down by 2, so there's only 3 letters to guess now. So if there are no repeated letters in this word, or the first repeated letter has already been found, the letter is added to guess so far. But if it isn't, we'll just skip that little bit there. Then it has the same code here, but it does not increment guess so, or not increment. It does not add to guess so far. So guess so far only gets added E on the second E, if that makes sense. So this check here should work for repeated letters that have two repeated, or words that have two repeated letters because of this check. And yeah, in both sections of this code here, this.correct list, which is the correct guesses array, is pushed with a DOM element that just contains this key. That just is this key, and then it's positioned accordingly with the I variable that is in the for loop, based off the width and the height. And it's also positioned using the length of that array. And then letter of word is set to 0 so that letters can't be spammed to win. So if this word is 3, I can't just put T 5 times to win. That was an issue I ran into a lot. So that's how I remedied that. And then this does the same, except if it is a repeated letter, then the letter occurrences go down and the repeat is set to false so that it will run this next time. And that's correct letter. Now for the incorrect letter function. So this first creates a variable called cutoff, which changes depending on the difficulty. So cutoff is the max amount of guesses that can be inputted before a user fails. So in normal mode, it's 6, easy it's 9, and hard is 4, as we saw earlier. So this if statement is a bit different from the one in correct letter. So it checks for multiple things. It checks that, it checks that the key inputted is not in the word. It checks that it is one of the real letters. It checks that this.I, which is the incorrect guesses variable, is not past the cutoff mark for the difficulty. And it checks that this letter has not been guessed so far. So it has all these checks to make sure that, yes, this can go in this little column right here. So Z, it's not in the word, it's a real letter, hasn't been 6 guesses yet because we're on normal difficulty, and it hasn't been guessed yet. So if I try Z again, nothing happens. So this plays the incorrect noise, as we heard earlier. This increments incorrect guesses instead of taking away from a variable, like incorrect letter. Or correct guess. No, correct letter. A lot of similar words in here. It adds that to guess so far as well. So this then puts this in the incorrect guesses array. And it does the same thing as correct letter. It just positions it based off the incorrect counter and based on its place in the array, and it adds that to the array. And the final chance music is just using that cutoff variable too. So this has now gone through everything in classes and words, but there's still a bit of code in Sketch. And the first bit of this is for replays. So this menu here generates different headers and buttons. So these are I'm pretty sure the only headers and DOM elements that are not initially made in setup. So these are for the replay thing, as we see earlier. So if I guess the word right here, we see these. We get the victory, we get the buttons. This little get stylish function is pretty simple. It takes a DOM element and then styles it to the selected font. And the menu check function. So this is, as I said earlier, this shows and hides pretty much every DOM element. So it first stylizes them all. It sets the difficulty to the user selected difficulty. And the first if statement here is if the state equals 1. So if we have if the state 1 is the Hangman game state, as we're in right now. So this hides the welcome things right here. This hides these if we press play. It also hides the loading header, which is hard to see because it loads so fast, but in between, we'll see that more later. So if we're in the Hangman game state, it animates the gallows, which is these little lines. So if we caught that earlier on. I'll just reload this so you can see the animation library is also used for these as well. You can see that coming in there. Looks pretty slick. And then this is the GitHub of the animation library. So this outline here of the hangman is drawn just using no fill and stroke gray, so that none of that's filled in, and it looks like a little hollow outline. And then if the difficulty is on easy, then the face parts are drawn, the face outline. So only on easy and hard will you see this. No fill and stroke are reset so that the hang the man drawings are filled in correctly, and text settings are used for incorrect guesses up here. And if win or lose becomes true, the draw loop stops. So that's what win or lose is changed a lot throughout the program, and it's pretty much just right here. It stops the draw loop, and that's why you can't input anything or change you can't input any letters after you win or lose. And then there's this play again function. So play again, it uses that replay menu function as we looked at earlier. It creates those elements, and it shows the those different elements, and then it checks for the replay buttons as we saw earlier. So if I just play a little around here, can I get it right? No, not buck or look. Is it cook? Nope. It nook tuck. Dang. So if I press replay yes here, this goes to the replay function, which just sets the state to 3, which displays the loading header. It resets the variables, as we'll see in a minute here, and then it uses the press play function again to reset the game. So there was the now loading header, but because it's created so early in setup, it doesn't actually load very long. And so if I just play another game here, oh man, what is this word? Sing, yes. So if I press no, we go to the return to menu function, which is very simple. It just sets the state to 0, which is the main menu state, and it also resets the variables so that when you press play, nothing funky happens. So the reset variables function. So this is ran whether the user chooses to play again or not, so that the next time they play, all the variables that are used in the main hangman state have been reset. So this hides all those replay DOM elements. It sets the loop back on, and it uses the replay menu again. And it resets all those variables that we saw before. It resets the letters array, guess so far. And this was a major headache point. Took a couple weeks to figure out. So since the correct guesses and incorrect guesses are global arrays, we have to reset them in a global function like this. We can't reset them in classes, or the code can't reset them in classes.js, and it has to individually remove all of these. So I went back and looked at my last coding project, the last.fm searcher, which also used these kind of DOM elements in a similar way. So it went through and removed each of the elements. So that's what this does. It also resets the array here, just to avoid any hiccups. So yeah, each element is removed so that there is space, and it's reset so that they don't linger on screen after. Even if you do this, but you didn't do this section, this for loop here, the letters would still remain on screen. So that was a big headache to figure out, but it was a good challenge, and I'll be able to look back on it now for future projects. And then these variables are reset to win or lose set to false, so that the loop can go again. And that's pretty much those ones. So if we go back to menu check, we now go into state 2, which is the options menu. And there's not a whole lot here that is not DOM related. It's pretty much just hiding these main DOM elements and showing these ones. And when the back button is pressed, we go back to the options menu, as I mentioned before. So these are actually doing the same function, just using the state. And if state is 3, then the loading header is shown, as we saw earlier. Good. Press yes, there it is. Boom, disappears. And if the state is unchanged or returns to 0, so if it returns to the main menu, then these are shown again. All these ones are hidden, And start just checks, is just ready to go. Press play. And if I'm correct, I think that's everything. That's all the major code structures and different, that's all the code that goes in this project here. So for my conclusion here, I kind of just want to be honest. I'm not completely happy with how this turned out. I really feel like I could have done more with it, and with more time, I definitely could have. But also, a lot of that is on me. I needed to manage my time a bit more with this project. I had started it way earlier, and I got a good head start on it. But I ran into just a few issues that took a long time to crack, and that demotivated me a lot. So it was hard to focus on it and just get certain issues done, especially when I wasn't making progress for weeks at a time. And it seems a little silly because it's a pretty simple program, but global arrays and variables and just small little issues really bug me, and it's really hard for me to get past those things. But there was a lot of this program that was really fun to do as well. Not so much the drawing things, but more so a lot of the different logic issues, when I did figure them out, was very satisfying. And that's my favorite part of computer science in general, is just figuring out those tough to crack problems. When you do get past them, it feels amazing. But it's a bit different when it's a school assignment like this with a deadline. And most of the time that wasn't an issue because I had a long time to work on this. But near the end, it definitely demotivated me. And I do feel like this could have been a lot better than how it turned out. There were a lot of things I wanted to accomplish here that I didn't have time to, or I just didn't get around to. But I'm still proud of how it's turned out in this state, and I hope to go back and both look back on this project for future reference and also go back to it to update it, just for fun. I want to keep up my programming, especially through the summer. This fall, I'm going into interactive design and technology at Sask Polytech in Regina. And while that won't involve as much coding, it still will involve a lot of coding. And I'm excited for that. But I'm also excited I'm excited to keep up my coding skills throughout the summer and try to not become rusty in them. So I'm going to try and update this and both the Last.fm searcher and create other code projects that can expand my coding skills without being under the pressure of deadlines and stuff, which is just unavoidable with things like this. But overall, I'm proud of how this came out. I feel like it used pretty much almost everything we learned in Computer Science 30. And it was a fun project that I'd wanted to do since the start of the year, and I got to realize it through this project. So that's my presentation, and I'm not really sure what to say at the end here. I hope you enjoyed it.